and broadcast. And hello, welcome to the world of the Big 12, realignment, the Pac 12, and everything else going on in college football. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Nathan Bomber Brown, and I've got with us today Jason Watkins. Jason, go ahead and say whatever you want to say right off.
Okay. Well, I'm Jason Watkins. I'm the host of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. You can find me on Twitter at BirdieManDub or obviously on YouTube. It's at CFB-pod. That's the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast.
All right, and I'm really grateful that Jason was. I got to get in the frame here.
Thanks
I'm
for
really
having me.
grateful that Jason was able to join me this afternoon because something's been on my mind for the last 3 or 4 days, and my Big 12 Mafia webcast is really important because I only want to cover things that are real relevant. I'm not going to be into gossip. I'm not going to be into anything that really isn't critical. So when I go online, it's going to be an important thing that we're going to talk about. So today, and Jason was nice enough to join me. We're going to talk about realignment fatigue. Where does all this nonsense end? And then we're going to follow that up with what is misinformation and disinformation. I'm not going to define it for you. Everybody got a dictionary on their phone, but everybody knows it when they see it. And that's something I really want to try to call out and see if we can explore what the problem is with all the reporting around realignment and how we have so many dueling sources of information. In the age of fake news, you have to really filter through and decide what is the news you're going to pay attention to. In a future webcast, I'm actually going to do an entire show on who, in my opinion, are the best people to follow. It will probably be tomorrow, and it's going to be really in depth on what reporting is from the reporter standpoint. How does that work? What's the difference between named and unnamed sources, and how are they used? So anyway, without any further ado, Jason, let's hear your thoughts about realignment fatigue.
Oh, realignment fatigue. Yeah, well, and I hadn't thought a ton about this, but I think it is a good subject. Really, just for the past, obviously, this has been going on for about a year, ever since USC, UCLA decided to make the move
Right.
and go to the Big Ten. Immediately, it seems as if, obviously, and I don't know if you watched my show yesterday or not, but we were essentially talking about how really the Pac-12 has taken its shots at the Big 12.
Right.
And truthfully, I'm an Oklahoma fan, and my show's mostly centered around Oklahoma. I do a lot of national topics as well. We cover Colorado football as well a little bit too, but that being obviously a Pac-12 school. The thing is that I don't have a dog in the fight, but it seems weird to me that all the attacks seem to be headed towards the Big 12. None of them at the Big 10, who got this all started when it
Exactly.
comes to the Big 12.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
So I think if there's any of that, it's a lot. The fatigue that I would feel is that you're getting so much of this. Well, you were talking about misinformation and disinformation, just things that really they don't matter. Number one, you
Right.
start talking about things like AAU versus non-AAU schools.
Mm-hmm.
This fallacy that everybody seems to have that, the Pac-12 is so academically superior to everybody else in the country,
Which is
which is
nonsense. Everybody knows
nonsense,
it's
complete
nonsense.
ridiculous nonsense.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of that kind of stuff, and you just wonder kind of why. But to some extent, I understand. The people in the Pac-12 don't want to see their conference go away, and then they have reputable sources coming at them telling them that this is just a bunch of junk,
Right.
a bunch of bull, and it's not. You know what I mean? The things that are going on, they're really happening. The things that are getting reported, you hear people like Dennis Dodd talking about it. You hear people like
Right.
Andrew Marchand talking about it.
Yep.
Everybody from the Athletic, Pete Thamel from ESPN.
Yep.
And supposed to be, if you're listening to the guys on the other side of it from the Pac-12 perspective, they're calling everybody out as, well, you heard Tony Altimore the other night basically say that Dennis Dodd was a National Enquirer type,
He
which
did,
is
which I thought
ridiculous.
was crazy.
Right. And I mean, it's ridiculous. This is a guy that has been covering college football and stuff for what, 30 years?
Oh, and
You
not
know?
just football. He's an all
Right.
over sports coverage
Exactly.
guy.
Right. But I mean, he's not peddling a bunch of BS, out here. Although I would say that Baltimore is a lot of times. So it's just funny to me that that's the fatigue that I would get, is that you hear so many things on top of, about how terrible the Big 12 is, and they make it about what it isn't when it comes to this realignment stuff. What it really is about is whether or not there's a whether there's a linear partner for the Pac-12, whether or not there's going to be any kind of deal whatsoever that's going to get them on linear television. And what, from everything you can tell, there's really not at this point. Now, we're hearing things about USA Network today. We're hearing things about some other of these,
NBC, yeah,
NBC, some other ones. And listen, I said on my show last night, I'm not hoping for the death of the Pac-12 like a lot of people are. I'm not. Do I feel like it's inevitable at some point? I think if you read the tea leaves, probably. It could be 5 years down the line. If they get some kind of deal going, then you're probably going to see that happen later. But the only thing that I've ever said is that if you're going to sit around and wait on Oregon and Washington, they're going to go to the Big Ten as soon as they get an invitation.
absolutely.
Right.
No
So
question.
if once that happens, then what happens to your conference in the Pac-12? And if you are one of those four corner schools and you have an opportunity to go ahead and move to the Big 12, and the four corner schools being obviously Utah, Colorado, and the two Arizona schools. If you're one of those two schools, do you wait for the other shoe to drop and turn down a Big 12 invitation right now,
Exactly.
when 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, you're looking at this going south anyway?
Right.
You could get established within that conference and get more exposure than what you're ever going to get, even if they do finally sign a deal within the Pac-12. So it's just, to me, I feel like if exposure matters to you, and if the long run matters to you, then you're probably going to see some of these things happen more quicker than a lot of Pac-12 fans want to see it happen. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, your analysis is spot on, and not to get diverted, but I just want to let you know, OU is a major university, so your opinion matters regardless of what conference you're in. So,
Right. Well, thank you.
I really appreciate you being here with us, even though it's not necessarily in your neighborhood. So
No, and I mean, I've covered the Big 12, as a reporter throughout part of my career, and so, and I love college football, and as I said, I don't know that all this that's going on with the realignment and everything the way that it is. Realignment's been around for a while, but this is not necessarily what I feel like is great for the sport. I just don't know that it is, because when you start losing rivalries, because think about it, you guys aren't going to be playing Utah every year.
yeah,
And that's not good. I think the Holy War is it. I mean, wow. If Utah was to get into the Big 12, which I know that's not something that they care to do, that would be great for the Big 12. That would be great for BYU. I think it would be great for Utah. I think that it's bad for Oklahoma State to have quit on the Bedlam series as well.
Yeah, I never understood that. We'll have to talk about that, because that's something I've always wondered. Why can't they just schedule it out of conference and just have
It's not
it be
something
one of
that
those
it's not
games?
something that they want to do. And to be fair, it's a lopsided series. I wouldn't call it necessarily a rivalry, because it's really lopsided.
Okay.
That being said, it's a big deal for people in the state of Oklahoma that want to see those two teams play every year.
Right.
Is it over forever? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it's probably over at least as long as Mike Gundy is the coach of the Oklahoma State. So,
Oh, is that the reason it stopped?
yeah, he made it about, about scheduling, difficulties or whatever. But it seems to me like you could have made that one work.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think most of those rivalries, like the Cyhawk game in Iowa, there's no reason that those can't just be one of the annual games. It's just out of conference, But
Right.
yeah, the thing I think, and the reason I had this idea in my head for this show is I feel like I represent the everyman, right? I have a lot of experience. I'm 50, almost 53 years old, and I've been in love with college football since 1975. So I remember in the 70s those amazing football games that were in the Big Eight, I think, with Nebraska and Oklahoma and Texas. No, Texas was Southwest Conference, but the
Uh-huh.
point is those games go back decades,
Yeah.
and to lose them because of this realignment stuff is kind of what I'm trying to get at. Is the fatigue that I mentioned is all based around the fact that so much reporting has been disproven.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is it lowers the belief system of the games that are proven, right?
Right.
And the people that are reporting on those things are proven, and that's frustrating for me, for just a Joe Blow who really wants to put my passion into this. But
Yeah.
if people are tired of it, that's a concern, right? Because
Right.
it kind of takes away one of those ideas that you could use for future shows.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And I think that people are definitely tired of all of it being centered around money and everything else when all they really want to do is watch college football,
Right.
watch their favorite teams play against their not favorite teams, their
Yeah.
favorite teams to root against. Um, and if you go back to Texas and some of these other ones, when Texas A&M left, I think that one, and for an Oklahoma fan, the Nebraska one hurt because
Right.
that was a
Of
that was
course
a
it did. That was
that was a
huge.
huge
Yeah.
rivalry for Oklahoma for a long time,
Yeah.
all the way back to the Big 8 days. And when Tom Osborne was there with Coach Switzer, I mean, we want to talk about some ridiculous tough games that they had. That was a
Yeah.
big deal. So when Nebraska left, and then obviously Colorado, and Colorado hasn't been good since they got to the Pac-12. They've had
Right.
exactly one winning season in the Pac-12.
Yeah. And that was hard to believe to me. I
Right,
thought that
because
was. I thought they would be
they were a
good.
power program.
Yeah.
I remember those years where they won one national championship, but they were in the mix for the national title for 3 or 4 years in a
Well,
row.
the whole 90s, they were playing games for the entire
Absolutely.
decade that meant things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and at the end of the '80s, even. I mean, I can remember that year that Notre Dame played them with Rocket Ismail running back that
Yep.
punt, and it getting called back, and Colorado ends up winning it, and I
That's
think
right.
that was their national title year. But anyway, what a great game, and
Yeah.
I was a kid, and I remember that game. So some of these things that we're starting to see go away. I think that when you start getting into the playoff and things like that, I mean, the playoff is great to an extent. I don't know that it was necessarily something you had to do as far as turning it into 12 teams right now.
Right.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that either. But are you taking away some of the importance of the regular season now?
Right.
Because I can see 2 and even 3 lost teams making the playoff if you're an SEC Big Ten team. And I can see some teams that maybe play a different schedule. I'm not going to say anything bad about anyone, but if you play a
Right.
lighter schedule or anything like that, and you somehow come away with one loss or none, that you could still not be as good and get in.
Right.
And I don't know that that from what I can tell, I don't know that it's all going to be all about who's the best teams, and that's I don't know, man. There's the haves and the have-nots, the haves and have-nots, and there's also and I don't know that having 2 conferences in the end is really the answer, but bottom line is it looks like that's where we're headed at some point. Now, I think that the Big 12 and their new commissioner he's trying to change that up and trying to get in the way of that with
Right.
some of the things he's going to do with basketball and stuff like that can keep them Competitive to some extent, because even if your football contract is a little smaller than the other ones, but you have a basketball contract that goes with it, then more of that money stays within your football program. So maybe that's helpful. I don't know. We're gonna find out, but I'm not necessarily thinking that this is the best thing in the world for college football. So
Right.
I think we're headed towards a professional model, and that's not exactly what everybody wanted.
So along those lines, and I'm glad you brought that up, the whole idea of 2, 3, 4 conferences, I think it can really re-energize college football if it's done right. But I think the $1
Right.
billion contracts after this next Big Ten they're not going to get that money. It's not going to be there in 5 years. I think
Really?
no, I don't think because we're in this recession, interest rates are real high. I think the media dollars you're going to start seeing pulled back a bit. Now, this is my opinion, right? It's
Sure.
not like there's nothing I can base that on it except for just looking empirically at what's in the news, watching financials, and I just don't. I think it's going to be 4 conferences. The Big Ten and the Big 12 are going to absorb what's left of the Pac 12 that's relevant. Those that aren't relevant are going to get cast aside. That's not going to be Washington State and Oregon State, by the way. I'm talking about teams that the Pac 12 might add now that in 4 or 5 years don't exist, or when the league's gone, they
Right.
might not have a chair to sit in. So, anyways,
I
without
think it
getting
would depend on
sidetracked
what
on
they
that.
do with their basketball programs and stuff, because I think that
Oh,
the Big 12,
sure.
that's how they stay. If the Big 12 is going to have
It
to
is.
embrace basketball and
Yeah.
really attack the basketball schools in
Yeah, I
order to
agree.
stay relevant.
Yeah, I agree. And
Because
I
if
think
your
I
league
think
is I mean, they need to be what the SEC is to football and basketball in
I
order
think
to
they're
stay
going to
that
do
way.
it. I honestly think they're
Right.
going to get Gonzaga. I think
Yeah.
eventually UConn will come in because there's no
Villanova,
chairs for
maybe.
them in back east. Even
Hmm.
though they're a good potential, they're not going to absorb UConn just for basketball. So Brett Yormark is a genius. When they hired him, that was the smartest hire in college athletics administration, I think, maybe ever. Depending on how this all flushes out, I think Brett Yormark really needs all the kudos in the world, and they better pay him because he will leave. They're going to have to overpay to keep him, but he's
Hmm.
worth every cent.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Everything that he's done in his career tells you he's worth every penny.
Right.
And because as and this is something we talked about last night. For the fact that we're talking about the Pac-12 being in the trouble that it's in right now, and it is, but it could have destroyed and finished off the Big 12 right after Texas and Oklahoma made their decision to leave. It could
Yes.
have. The problem there was with them was that George Kliavkoff has a hard time talking people into anything when it comes to those presidents. He's
I
not very
100% agree.
persuasive. And that's when that was one of the things when Tony Altimore was talking about that on the show with Mark Rogers and Kuz and those guys the
Right.
other night.
Which was a great call by. If you haven't seen that show, you need to find it and absolutely watch it.
Hmm. Yeah, but when he was talking about that I guess essentially as well as what I was saying is they were talking about the fact that the presidents are in charge. Well, the presidents are in charge of every conference.
Of course.
That's it. It's not a commissioner that I would say that Greg Sankey probably has more power than any of the rest of the conference commissioners, but he's not in charge of the SEC either.
Right. That of course, yeah.
The presidents of each university are. So that's big duh. You know what I mean? But that being said, is that the difference is that when you talk about the Big 12, Brett Yormark was able to come in and, at times like what the whole deal with Oklahoma and Texas leaving a year early for the SEC. So it'll
Yes.
be the 24 season. It wasn't going to be. It was going to be the 25 season. He was able to bring all those presidents together, work out a deal between them.
Yep.
Everybody's happy. They're breaking away. But when it comes to Yormark, when it comes to Kliavkoff, he hasn't been able to get the presidents to say yes about anything, not one time, whether
Well,
it
and
be
he's had some really bad PR issues.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
doesn't communicate well for a job as high as his. He needs to get better at that. And I think their decision making has been really flawed. So
right.
I would never call for anybody's job. People's jobs and livelihoods are very important. So I don't want him to get fired from the Pac-12. But I do think that
Well,
the
he's driving
presidents
it
need
into
to
the
put
ground.
some
Yeah.
guardrails around him.
They need to well, they need to listen to what he has. I mean, there's some things that he was trying to do. He wanted to go ahead and add those schools from the Big 12 that would have knocked the Big 12 out.
Right.
There wouldn't be a Brett Yormark in the Big 12. You know, had he been able to get the presidents to listen and say, "Hey, let's take Texas Tech and Oklahoma State and Baylor or Kansas or whoever it was." I've heard as many as 6 of them that could have went. If he was able to make that happen before they added BYU
Right.
and obviously UCF and Cincinnati, these other schools, Houston, then the Big 12 would be the one that's no more.
I
Or it would
agree.
definitely not be a Power 5 conference anyway. So it would have,
Yes.
it would have been the same type of deal. That could have happened. And, ironically, it was apparently USC and UCLA that made the biggest stink
Yeah,
about it.
that's right. USC's president, I think,
And then,
said that.
9 months later, they're out.
Right.
So,
Well, I would argue they were already planning the Big Ten move when
oh yeah. Oh,
Klyavkov
I don't think that there's any doubt
started.
about that.
I
I
think
don't
they've
think
been
there's any
working on
doubt
that
about
for
that.
years. That
Sure.
didn't just happen overnight. So they knew that they needed more time. They needed to
Mhm.
give more time to the Big Ten so that they could put the whole thing together. And so
Right.
those presidents bought them basically 2 years of planning. So Klyavkov, anyways, I don't want to get hung up on that. Whatever happens with the Pac-12, that'll have his name on it. Not and even Scott is a little in the past now. But let's talk about the whole realignment fatigue. Um, I said a line to somebody in Twitter one day that realignment is money alignment because it has generated more revenue for shows like ours, shows everything else in Twitter. I mean, it's basically kept Twitter alive since Musk took over just by being unsettled. So many people are getting into it, but I do believe people may be getting tired of it at the same time.
Oh, I think everybody's sick of it. I think it's uh I know as much as Pac-12 fans want to know what their deal is going to be, or
Right.
whether or not they're going to be together or not. I think that the rest of the country wants to know too. All this constant, you've got the Monty show every day talking about it, blah.
Yeah,
You've got
it's true.
everybody every day talking about it. It's kind of old, um, you know, and to some extent, I mean, if you're a content creator on here and you hear all this news every day, I mean, even the big boys, CBS and
Right.
and the Athletic and ESPN to some extent, they talk about it almost daily.
Yeah.
So there's always information out there. And you can definitely get tired of it. I kind of equated to back, when I go back to all the way to you start thinking about like the OJ Simpson trial. People were sick of that by the time it was all over with, but it was the
Right.
only thing on
Right.
television,
Yeah.
so and now, it's the way that they do things in this country is that we run it across the car wash every day.
Right.
It's going to be on every channel everywhere. So you
And
can't
it's I
really get
think
away from it.
it's reaching a crescendo right now.
Right.
I honestly believe what Greg Flugard talked about 2 weeks ago about the middle of May. I think it
Hmm.
was the 17th that he said they his money perch guy led him to believe that watch and circle that date. And what
Hmm.
is that? We're only a week and a half away,
Woohoo.
and a little more than that, and this could be over for all intents and purposes, depending on what happens there. But for you and I, and
Yeah.
for Coos and John Kurtz and Flugar
Hmm.
and others that
Yeah, well, I mean, John
it,
Kurtz's entire audience, that's all they want to talk about,
it
you
is,
know?
but it's not going away after that, because then we
Yeah,
still have this whole old ditty that's going around now that the Big 12 is so much lower than the Big 10 and the SEC and the ACC sort of get them by somehow,
yeah.
just because
Well, they
of
can't
the.
go anywhere.
So I don't think recruiting by itself that doesn't win games. Otherwise, Texas A&M would have the last 3 national championships. So
Fair enough.
recruiting by itself doesn't win. It takes an organization to win. There's
Mhm.
no I in team, and I think it's just
But
honestly,
there
I think
hasn't been as big a the
it's
problem is there hasn't been as big of a gap between the money,
yeah, but
because
money
this money
isn't.
hadn't started. The money
Yeah, but
hadn't
money
started yet,
isn't
though.
the end all be all. They can only have, what
It's
is
not.
it? 85. They can only have 85 scholarships for each team.
You're right.
There and this is the argument when I say research and athletics. There's no one-to-one relationship between the money there, and if there was, Stanford would be undefeated for the last 100 years because they're over what 10 billion or something. That's not the number, but their endowment is ludicrous. It has Stanford's worth more money than Ecuador. Stanford's worth more money than the
That's fair.
Netherlands.
That's
So
true.
that
But
doesn't
here's
win
the
you
other
ball
part of that.
games, Jason.
How much of that money is actually earmarked for the athletic
No,
program?
I
Because
would say
I
very
would
small, 1%.
if that. Yeah,
Yeah,
right. So,
yeah.
if they're getting they're making, I think Altamore's little chart that he always has those cute little
Yes, he
charts up for
does.
everything.
Graphs and charts.
His little colorful charts that mean nothing. But your $2 billion or whatever it is that they come up with every year.
Right.
But, none of that's going to the football program. They could care less about their football program at Stanford.
Right.
And
Right.
the same thing goes for Cal. What did Washington do last year? $770 million or something, in 2020, whenever that chart
Right.
was. How much of that went to the football program? Probably none of it. A lot of that has to do with their medical facilities and a lot of it, I'm sure, has something to do with their AAU, research. So, some of this stuff we're talking about, and that's where the fatigue that I have over the whole deal is that the non-issues that become issues, the
Right.
things that we start talking about that don't really mean anything, when it comes to this realignment
Yeah,
stuff, because
wasted energy. Yeah,
it's absolutely wasted stuff. And,
I
somebody
agree.
that I know, and I think I told you this the other day, the person that I know that's close to the situation at one of these schools, and the only thing that she said was, if that's what we're going to if we're going to hold on to that life raft, that means there's zero other reasons why you would keep the Pac-12 together anymore.
I 100% agree. In fact,
You know,
I don't know if I sent a message to you and Kuz about this,
uh-huh.
but I know I sent it out into the Twitterverse, and that basically is that Stanford and Cal are extorting the rest of the schools in the conference by saying, if you leave, and this is where Altamore is smart, and he's right.
Right.
That is, if you leave this collection and the Pac 12 ceases to exist, we're going to cut you off from all the support we've been providing to you for research, all the team ups, all Jason, it's not a
I
joke.
don't know how you could do it, though. I mean,
I
if you're an AAU program, you're still an AAU program.
Yeah, but we're talking about this loose collection of what did Altamore say? He said it's either the Ivy League or the
They're
Pac-12
not the freaking
West,
Ivy League, for
right?
Pete's
And
sake.
that's how he compared USC, Cal, and Stanford.
Give me a joke. That's
I'm just
just a
letting you
joke.
know when he speaks truth about those items, I would take it as gospel. I honestly believe that
What's
that is
true?
their self. They're looking in the mirror, and that's what's being reflected back to them, and that is then dictating the behavior going forward. So I don't think it's a joke. And
Hmm.
if you were in a club, and this is a club that you helped build and found, and there was a new management that came in and says, okay, well, you guys can have all the club you want, but I'm taking the game with me. And then they ask you, do you want to be a part of that? Or are you going to stay where you're at, where the guy's paying for your utilities? He's
I don't know
buying you
why
a house.
I don't
He's,
see how you can hold anybody hostage with that, because they're one of the schools that are going to be leaving. Stanford and Cal
yeah,
is
they're
the
probably going to
second.
go Ivy League, I think.
They're
That's where
not
I think
going to
they're
the
going to
freaking
go.
Ivy League. They're not going to the Ivy
I
League.
think they will,
That's
but that's
silly
just me.
talk. That will never happen. That will never
Okay.
happen.
All right.
That will never happen. The Ivy League wants zero to do with Stanford or Cal.
Well,
Okay, they do. They don't want anything to do with them.
let's
Now,
see how it
Big
sorts
Ten,
out, and I'll say
the
if
Big
you're right,
Ten,
I'll say I'm wrong.
the Big Ten, sure, I can see
Right.
them being, and they fit the Big Ten and all that.
Except for in competition, there's 0 matches. Neither one of
Hey,
them can
what? Wait a
compete.
minute though. There's how many schools are in the Big Ten that are really that good at anything?
But I'm saying that what I'm talking about is just by them being in
They're
the Big
just
Ten,
like
they bring no
Northwestern.
money with them, Jason. That's my point. Yeah, they can join the Big Ten. Of
They
course they
bring
can.
research dollars with them. They bring,
But they don't
and
bring
everybody keeps
anything
talking about this
athletically.
research dollar stuff. They don't. That may matter in the Big Ten of whether or not you're an AAU program, because it does apparently matter.
Yeah,
Right.
no, and yeah, I agree with that. Sure.
But that's how they'll bring. But the bottom line is, what does it bring? It brings Notre Dame possibly into the fold, which is going to be
Right.
helpful. It brings, and when you start looking at SC, that also helps bring Notre Dame into the fold. If
Yeah.
you start connecting dots to these other programs, that's where you're starting to see where they're going to have, that's why you would want to pick up a Stanford, is because that's going to help with the Notre Dame thing. What they want at the Big Ten, it's not so much that they cared about having SC. They want Notre Dame.
Of
And
course.
Notre Dame's right
And
there in the
Stanford
area.
and Notre Dame would go together. I totally see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just
But
like
that
USC and Notre Dame goes
doesn't cover
together.
Cal though.
But Cal, okay, yes, it does, because if you get Stanford, you have to get Cal. If you don't get Cal, you don't get Stanford,
So
because
you
they're
just think it's
tied
all a come
together.
along. You think that one goes to the other just because they
Of
have
the
to go together.
rivalries, yes,
All right.
those things
Okay.
matter to people, and that's really more than market size, more than anything
Oh yeah,
else.
I don't even worry about that at all. I'm not
That
talking
kind
about
of
that.
stuff, the rivalry stuff, is what matters. And if you are going to
Of
keep,
course. Yep. Bob
it
Thompson
in
said that. Yep.
listen, and Bob Thompson says that often.
Yep.
And think about this: if they're going to ever be able to strong arm Notre Dame, and this is something that the coach talks about all the time, that I think that Notre Dame would choose the SEC over the Big Ten after everything that's happened in the last 50 years with
It's
them.
quite possible.
But not if they
Yep.
don't have a choice. If they get told that, hey, either you join the Big Ten or you no longer get to play USC, you no longer get to play Stanford, you no longer, all these teams that you play every year, Purdue, everybody else, that's
Yeah.
always on their schedule, either you do that or we stop playing you. Now
Okay.
you have something to hold over Notre Dame's head, right?
Okay.
They'd love to stay independent, but
Right.
if you're not able to, it's going to be because of that. And you have to have a way to keep your schedule if you're going to be an independent program.
Of course.
And so in other words, that's the way that you're going to keep it from happening. I could even see Notre Dame choosing the Big 12 over the Big 10 because of all the stuff that happened between Michigan and Notre Dame over the anti-Catholic stuff a long time ago.
Well, I love this conversation with you because one, you know how to debate back and forth. That's something that it's a lost art. We were taught debate in high school when I was in high school. Now I'm not even sure they can spell debate out in the world right now. So you
Oh
and I
no,
can
they
disagree
get really
without being
upset.
disagreeable, and I
Sure.
appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
So
I do have to get.
oh yeah, no, I forgot. I'm going to talk about disinformation, misinformation now anyway. So I appreciate you coming, everybody. Please follow Jason at BirdieMan or at BirdieMan Dub. And Jason, go ahead and do your outro.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for having me. I appreciate you having me on there, Nathan. And obviously, we'll be doing a lot of work together coming up.
Yes.
But you can find obviously at BirdieMan Dub on Twitter. A lot of people I think are watching the show through there. And then you have at CFB-pod on YouTube. And then you can find us also on our website, hofmedia.us.
All right, next time I have you on, if you want to put that on a slide, I'm happy to show it to the world. I'll just
Will
load
do.
it up and click it.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right,
Appreciate you having me
have a
on.
great day, and we'll talk very soon.
Okay. Have a good
All
one.
right, thanks, Jason.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I'm not done. I've still like to continue to talk about this misinformation, disinformation topic, because honestly, this is something that's been a pet peeve of mine, and I would really like somebody to tell me what that means. So I picked this 247 Sports PowerPoint picture up, and I put it on here for the exact reason that if you'll notice, every one of these conferences is overlaying another conference. SEC's under the Big. The Big is over the Pac. The ACC is over the Pac. The Big 12 is under the Pac. I don't think this was an accident. I think for a lot of reasons, this type of picture can send a message out into the world. What does it really mean? Does this picture say that Big is over SEC and Pac-12? If you'll notice, SEC isn't over anything. Pac-12 is over under two, the Big in the ACC, and the Big 12 is under the Pac. That is some subversive messaging. I'm not sure it was on purpose, but I do believe that misinformation and disinformation out in the world has really almost ruined the reporting, the fun of what realignment can be. Now, let me sort of reiterate what I think realignment is. I think realignment is actually healthy for most things, because what it does is it takes things that aren't worth spending your time on and it throws them away. The next thing it does is it helps you refresh and get new ideas so that what you're doing is most important at the time. And that messaging being together is unifying, and it really helps keep everything at the end of the day out. And so to clear up that what misinformation and disinformation is, I want to use this as an example of the Dennis Dodd article on CBS Sports and the Athletic article that came. I kid you not, it must have been 90 seconds. It was posted right after Dennis Dodd posted his message. So what does that tell us? Well, for one, it tells us that there's been communication, there's been concern, there's been all kinds of meetings in the background to cover what messaging is going to be going out. It used to be stories weren't coordinated between reporters unless it was some big story that needed to have multiple voices in it and to really cover it. And we're talking regular mainstream news. Very rarely in the past did you have anything that was unified in sports. However, the realignment buzz for the last 9 months has thrown that rule out. Now we have competing press messages going out, press conferences, interviews on shows like mine and Jason's, and then other methods, social media and everything else you can't discount. All those things being related has been a revelation, I think, to the way news is reported now. Now it's basically planned at any time that somebody puts out something that goes against your messaging, planned messaging for conferences, they've got a message ready to counter it immediately. I'm talking. They barely had time to even type the message in. The Athletic did to refute the Dennis Dodd article. It couldn't have been a faster report. My question is, in all of the history of time, how many times has it happened that messages went out at the exact same time and had almost exactly the same reporting? There aren't a lot. The things that I think about would be 9/11, assassinations, other things that go on that basically everybody's caught off guard with. So they're all reporting at the same tempo. Um, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to me that Dennis Dodd puts out an article and they immediately are able to. The Athletic is immediately be able to refute it simply by replying to a one-line message. It doesn't happen. What that tells me is that that one-line message had been pre-written, pre-vetted, and pre-sussed out. They knew what they were doing, and they knew it was going to impact and directly affect Dennis Dodd. Now, let's talk about Dennis Dodd. There's not a more reputable. I would argue this with anyone. Dennis Dodd is a not. He's been in doing reporting for 30 years. Okay, 30 years is not a reputation you got over the last 10 years as some sideshow Bob. Uh, uh, they do not correlate. The only way those things correlate is if the sideshow Bob happens to find a penny at the exact same time that somebody else is finding a penny right next to it. The Dennis Dodd article is well written. It's vetted. I'm sure he probably had more than one person read it, and his reporting he stands by. To this day, he's still standing by his report. You have other people that are refuting that just because they don't like what the message was. I think is very disingenuous. I think it's. I mean, Dennis Dodd as a person. He has a family. Anything that affects him affects his family. It affects his employer, and for somebody to immediately out of hand discount an actual journalist reporting, I think we all need to take a look at this realignment anger that's been building up, and that people are tired of it, so much so that they're willing to push their own propaganda. Um, in my opinion, there's no other example or something that could be used as an example to show where reporting and other reporting go against each other head to head, real time. It is basically a cage match that they're locked together and they can't escape. What I would like to pass on to my viewers is that I am trying to see through that noise. I'm trying to be discerning so that what you hear from me is based on fact, it's based on multiple sources, and anything that affects the Big 12 or for me, BYU, um, I can't put more importance behind. It's something that you can see. I've bought gear. I have my whole life doesn't revolve around sports. I'm a little more balanced than that. It used to, but doesn't right now. Um, but I've invested season tickets in the past, high value events, championship games. I've spent untold thousands of dollars because that's something that is my hobby and I like to spend my time on. And I think anybody who does that has every right to defend that with a passion. I do not, do not have anything against the Pac 12. I grew up in Pac 12 country. I'm from Washington. It's called UW and Wazoo, and I understand how they tick. I'm not a USC fan, but it's not because I'm against some messaging or that they're getting more money in the Big Ten or that it's anything else than exactly they were against UW every year for the Pac-12 title. We're talking for decades. And there's no way that that would be okay to just sort of throw those relationships out the window because somebody writes an article that counters it. It goes against messaging. So I support the Pac 12. I will continue to support the Pac 12. I'm going to go through, and when realignment starts cleaning up, I'm going to be doing stories and shows with the media partners that I've made about how that new Pac-10, 12 is constituted, how its now competitive balance is in the world of college football, how the Big 12 has been affected by whatever changes are coming. And I have it on good report. I believe there was some reporting today that in the next couple of weeks we might have something break in this whole story. Um, and if that's made true, realignment reporting is not going away. In fact, it'll probably even get bigger because think about it. Anybody that leaves the Pac 12, if that happens, they're going to be bringing other teams in. That's thousands of storylines that can be covered by thousands of people on their own webcasts covering their schools. And that's all going to generate dollars. It's all going to generate reporting and media dollars. So I have no axe to grind. I have nothing to prove. And as far as I'm concerned, if realignment was to quote unquote end this time, the stories of realignment are going to go on for years, I believe decades, as these media deals end. And I do believe that after this next media window ends, what is it, 29 or 30, or maybe it's stretched to 31, that that is going to be heavily affected by what happens with the ACC. I'm going to report on that. I'm going to take stories and pass them on to you, not with my own slant on the reporting, but of analysis and care that is out there right now to cover those items. And I really feel that's important. And I want to express how much I appreciate this platform. The people that have subscribed to me on my YouTube and my 2 Twitter accounts, all of those people read news from me every day, and I respect the heck out of them. I really, really appreciate the time that they spend thinking about anything that could possibly coming from me. I'm not a train. I am a trained journalist, but I'm not a journalist. My dream in high school was to work at ESPN. I went and did an internship at the local TV station for 6 months and found out that he was making less money than me working 60, 70 hours a week than I was making working at a truck stop, of all things. And that's when I looked at my work life balance and I said, reporting is not in my future. But I have the college education to support my journalism chops. I understand how sources, unnamed sources, and other data points actually matter out in the world, how they affect how news flows. And so when I'm going to be reporting on things, it's going to be with that training and experience. But it is going to come with my opinions and the things that I care about. I'm passionate about these topics. I'm passionate about realignment. I'm passionate about the Pac-12, the Big 12, all the other conferences. I'm passionate about the way the Pac-12 and Brett Yormark have grown. I'm passionate about the media deals that are being struck and how they affect our daily lives. They're the things that we care about. And I'm hoping to pass on that passion to you, the viewer, so that you know I care. And I'm not going to be making stuff up. I will. I'm not going to say I won't be reporting any guesses, though. I think there is value in giving people credence and conversation time and airtime to express opinions. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here. So I will be bringing in guests that have reporting from their own sources that might go against the current vein. I'm going to be hosting those people on this show to give them a voice, because I believe I'm like 90% of other sports fans, and especially college football fans, that the fans' opinions matter more today than at any other time in the history of mankind. And I want to give those fans a voice. So in the future, I'm going to be having interviews with people from University of Arizona, University of Colorado, University of, or sorry, ASU, um, TCU, Cincinnati, West Virginia, when we get Coos on here again. Jason, well, he's still in. And John Kurtz. I haven't been able to hook up with him yet, except for a few DMs in Twitter. But I would love to have John Kurtz come on because I believe I'm almost certain actually that I look at sports the way John does. I've watched him the last year, been very impressed, and I really want to tap into that and get his insight on how everything has changed since he's been reporting for the last, well, what is it? Well over a year if we go by Flugar's notification last April. His guess or supposition that UCLA and USC were leaving to the Big Ten. I trust these guys. I act like I treat them like they're my partners on Twitter. The communications we have, I hold in sacred trust. I won't report anything if they say something that might be newsworthy, because I'm not here to break news. I'm here to opine on it and to talk about it and to give those that don't have a voice right now a voice. And I promise I'm going to do that. There's really nothing else for me to cover today. I do want to go through and make sure that everybody has my contact points and knows how to get with me on Twitter. My main account is at B12 Mafia, and that's the one that I'm going to be using for all Big 12 and BYU Cougar news. And then there's my personal, which I have my name on right now, and that's at BYU _ bomber with a 3 as the E. And I put my name on my account. I firmly believe in what Greg Flugar says, that if you don't have your name on your account, just this is a note for anybody who wants to participate in social media, that people that have their names on their accounts, that don't hide behind anonymity just to get in cheap shots or to try to earn clicks for whatever news item they think they're reporting on, I would suggest you put your name on your account. It doesn't have to be your full name. It could be initials on a last name. But that identification is really how social media influencers are now dictating who they associate with more when they do interactions on their shows. If you have your name on your account, you're more apt to be called in and asked your opinion. I want everybody to really pay attention to Jason Watkins and his Hall of Fame channel, Coos Corner with Justin Walker. Let's see, John Kurtz, Greg Flugar. I know a lot of people disagree with him, but I like Greg Swain. So, this is what matters. And out in the world, these things matter to these people, and I care about them. I think, did I just screw up Justin Walker? Yeah, I did. I screwed up. Not Greg Flugarts. I just screwed up somebody's name, and now it's going to bug me. Somebody's going to put a message in my response for this channel, and they're going to let me know. I can't recall somebody's last name. I just screwed up, but if I did, I apologize, and I'll do better in the future. I also want to announce here, and I'll put it in a short announcement actually. I'm going to be doing associations with some University of Utah people that I've come to know and like and trust, and we're going to do shows together. I don't think we need to be in a world where you have to be a jerk to disagree, as I told Jason a little bit ago. I think we should be able to debate, talk about very important items that affect people's lives every day, maybe even argue, but I'm not into personal attacks. I try extremely hard not to go through and nitpick people's information because they said something wrong or did something wrong. Everybody needs to be treating each other with much better care than we've been doing the last year. And I will say I've said and tweeted things in the past that you could say were inflammatory, but I withhold the right. I hold the right to be able to disagree extremely loud, because some people think that they can shout out and cover what the good voices are saying, whether that's on a call or it's on Twitter, and drown out other people with their power and prestige. Um, that's not going to happen on my show, and I hope it doesn't happen on other shows. But uh, the day of the little guy not having a voice, at least for the Big 12, and especially for the Cougars, um, those days are done. That's not going to happen anymore. And negative propaganda, and that's what it is propaganda, will be answered, and it'll be answered with facts. It'll be answered with special guests, um, and that's just the bottom line. Future shows, we're going to be doing a Utah, um, BYU conversation. I really hope you join that. I've got a NIL director has agreed to come on the show in the next week or two, and we're going to talk all things NIL. I invite every listener that's in the Twitterverse to attend that call, because it's going to be so educational, and I think it'll help us all understand how that works. We're going to talk recruiting. I've got a couple of BYU players that have offered to host with me, and I'm going to bring them on, let them speak their truth and how they represent BYU, and everything that's special about it. I'm going to be bringing on some other athletes for other schools and conferences. Um, and I'm going to try to be as guest heavy as I can, because outside of this one message, which is episode 100 of the at B12 Mafia, Big 12 Mafia podcast, that that is going to be happening. We are going to be doing these correlation shows, and everybody's going to have their voice, and I just want them to know that. So at B12 Mafia, at BYU underscore bomber with a 3, on my YouTube channel, the Big 12 Mafia YouTube channel, which I hope you subscribe to. Please like the show. If you don't like it, I'm okay with that, because I'm learning. This is only like my 7th show total. If you have constructive comments, I'm waiting for them. I'm waiting for the live show times when we can get people on and we can have super chats. Those days are coming, and in the not too distant future. So I appreciate you for joining. I see we've had 1 or 2 participants on and off through this call. It's a long call, but I needed to get these other pieces of information out on it. And those, well, I just lost my train of thought trying to say too many things out my mouth. I'm just going to let that go. Everybody have a great Friday. I might have a show later in the evening. There was one topic that I haven't talked about that I thought, oh, I know what I'd like to do is bring up that show where we talk about trusted sources, not only with Realignment, but athletics in general. And I think that's really important. I think it's something we should discuss. So everybody have a great day or great rest of your Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and please subscribe so you get those notifications on Twitter. You get those notifications on YouTube, and I'll have you join again in the future. Have a great night.